ሁሉና ወደ እሳቸው እንሄዳለን።
መካ አባ ከልማ ከነፉረ ቁልቁሉ ዋቀዩ ቶኮ ከበጀምቶታ አመንታ በተስካለ ኬኛ አቦቲ ኬኝ ያቆኖታ kabajamtoota ummata kabajamtoota hordoftoota amantaa ortodoksii tawaahidoo Itoophiyaa hunda keessan baga yeroo kanaan nu ga'e akkam bultan waaqayyo galanni isaa ga'u waa'ee muraasa xiqqoo dabarsuu barbaada nu uffalchaa abbootii keenya yeroo ammaa kanatti bakka kanatti argamuun keenya balaaleffannaa waa'ee seeraan alaa muudamtoota seeraan alaa phaaphaasota sinodoosiidhaan alatti biyya keenya keessatti magaalaa Walisoo keessatti amajjii 14 bara 2015 adeemsifame balaaleffachuudhaan bakka kanatti kan hiriire jechaadha. Kanaafuu warroonni bakka sanitti muudama adeemsises ta'ee warri muudamanis hundumti isaaniituu seera bu'uurri sinodoosa Itoophiyaa kenneetiif alatti adeemsifameef beekumsa sinodoosii Itoophiyaatiin alatti kan adeemsifame waan ta'eef ummata Oromootis ta'ee ummata Itoophiyaa hunda kan gaddisiise ta'uusaa yeroo ammaa kanatti hiriirri kun ragaa. Nutis kanuma ilaalchisuudhaan yeroo ammaa kanatti kan balaaleffachaa jirru. Kanaafuu qooqni afaan Oromoo, qooqni afaan Amaaraa, qooqni afaan Guraagee, qooqni afaan yookiin sabaaf sablammoota Itoophiyaa barumsi ortodoksii, barumsi bataskaana keenyaa hundumaaf hafuura ni ga'a. Waa'een isaan kana gochisan amma achitti raawwatan kun rakkoo guddaa uummata keenya irrattis ta'ee biyyattii irrattis uummatoo jira. Kan immoo sirna ortodoksii amantaa keenyaa kan sinodoosii kan sochoosaa jiru. Kanaafuu kana sirriitti haqaan ni balaaleffannaa. Seeraan alatti kan muudamni kun raawwatame. Kanaaf mootummaa Itoophiyaattis ta'ee mootummoota biyya alaattis haa ta'u uummatoota nu fakkaatanii fi amantaalee nu fakkaatan hundumtuu nu wajjin dhaabbatanii seera kana akka kara seeratitti deebi'amu sinodoosii keenya duuba hiriiruudhaan sinodoosii ortodoksii tawaahidoo Itoophiyaa tokkicha Patriarchii tokkicha teessoo tokkicha qulqullinaan isaan faana isaan duuba hiriirree ragaa ba'uu keenyaaf kan bakka kanatti argamne. Amma wanta nani jedhu kana baay'ee isinitti baay'isu wanta nani jedhu kana ana wajjin jettan jechaadha. Sinodoosii tokko teessoo tokko Patriarchii tokko irra deebi'aa yeroo tokko kuni uummata Oromoo kan biyya addunyaa kan biyya Itoophiyaa keessa goofisa akka dhaqqabuu fi sinodoosii tokko teessoo tokko Patriarchii tokko Waaqayyoon wajjin haa ta'u. Waaqayyo hunda bakka sirnaatti taa'uuchuu galatoomadha. Hundumti deebi'aa ቋንቋ እንደዚህ ነው። ገብቷችኋል አይደለም? ምን እንዳሉ ቤተክርስቲያን ይላል በምንም ቢሰበክ ቢቀደስ መንፈሳዊ ስለሆነ መልእክቱ ይደርሳል። እሳቸው የተናገሩት አንዲት ሲኖዶስ፣ አንዲት ሃይማኖት፣ አንዲት መንበር ያሉት በወሊሶ አካባቢ የነበሩ በበጎች በር ያልገቡ በሌላ በር የወጡ ወንበዴዎች ናቸው። እኛ የምንቀበለው አንዲት ሃይማኖት፣ አንዲት ኦርቶዶክስ፣ አንዲት ሲኖዶስ ነው ያጠቃለሉ። ይቀጥላል። እግዚአብሔር ይስጥልን። እናመሰግናለን። እንቀድሳለን። ብፁዕ አባታችን ብፁዕ አቡነ ናትናኤልን አይታችኋቸዋል። ኦሮምኛ ሲቀድሱ፣ ኦሮምኛ ሲያመሰግኑ እግዚአብሔር ከፈቀደ ወደፊት ታያላችሁ። እኔና ቀሲስ ሸዋ ሌሎችም ባሉ ኦሮምኛ መናገር ስለምንችል
በኦሮምኛ እንቀድስላችኋለን። ቃል ነው የሚገባ በኦሮምኛ እንቀድሳለን። እዚህ ለማሳወቅ ነው። ቤተ ክርስቲያኗ የማንን ቋንቋ እንደማትጠላ እንድታውቁት ነው። የእነዚህ ሶስቱ ጳጳሳቶች ሽሽታቸው ሩጫቸው ለተገፋው ሕዝብ አይደለም፣ የራሳቸውን ስልጣን ነው እንድታውቁ ግልጽ እንዲሆንላችሁ። በቋንቋቸው አልሰበኩም። የነበሩበት ሀገር ስብከት ምንም ነገር ያደረጉት ነገር የለም። የሰበኩት ብፁዕ አቡነ ናትናኤል ናቸው። ስለዚህ በእንግሊዝኛም እየተቀደሰ ነው፣ በሁሉም ይቀደሳል፣ ይመሰገናል። አሁን ቀጥታ የሚሄደው ሰሜን አሜሪካ ስፖርት ፌዴሬሽን አጭር ደቂቃ ምናልባት 3 ደቂቃ ትንሽ መልዕክት ያቀርቡልናል። እያጠናቀቀ ነው። ቀጥሎ ሊቀር የአቋም መግለጫዎች ነው። እንሰናበታለን። በጊዜ አቶ ዘውገ ቃኘው
አመሰግናለሁ። ምንጊዜም ከተጎዳውና ከተገፋው ሕዝብ በመቆም የሚታወቀው የ40 ዓመት ታሪክ ያለው የሰሜን አሜሪካ ኢትዮጵያ ስፖርትና ባህል ማህበር ያወጣውን መግለጫ ቀጥታ ነው። ከሰሜን አሜሪካ ኢትዮጵያውያን ስፖርትና ባህል ማህበር የተሰጠ ልዩ መግለጫ። የሰሜን አሜሪካ ኢትዮጵያውያን ስፖርትና ባህል ማህበር ከማንኛቸውም ሃይማኖታዊና ፖለቲካዊ ተግባራት ፍጹም ነፃ የሆነ ድርጅት እንደሆነ የታወቀ ነው። ሆኖም ግን በትውልድ ሀገራችን ኢትዮጵያ ኢሰብአዊና የዓለም መንግስታት ሕግ የሚያወግዛቸውን በዘር በማንነትና በሃይማኖት ላይ ያነጣጠረ ጥቃት በኢትዮጵያውያን ወገኖቻችን ላይ ሲደርስ የተበላሸው እንዲስተካከል ሕገወጥ ድርጊቶችን ማስቆም የሚገባው የመንግስት ክፍል ኃላፊነቱን በአግባቡ እንዲወጣ በሀገራችን ኢትዮጵያ የሕዝብ ሰላምና ደህንነት እንዲሰፍን የማህበራችን አቋም በተለያዩ አጋጣሚዎች ስንገልጽ ቆይተናል። አሁንም በድጋሚ ሕይወታቸውን ያላግባብ ላጡት ለተፈናቀሉትና ከፍተኛ ሐዘን ላይ ስላሉት የኢትዮጵያውያን ወገኖቻችን ሐዘናችን ስለሆነ ድምፃችንን ማሰማታችን እንቀጥላለን። ኢትዮጵያውያን ፈጣሪያቸውን እንደ ፈቃዳቸው እንዲያመልኩና በእምነት ተቋሞቻቸው ሕግና የመተዳደሪያ ደንብ መሰረት እንዲተዳደሩ መንግስት አስፈላጊውን ዋስትና መስጠት እንደሚገባው እናውቃለን። በአንጻሩ ግን መንግስት ጣልቃ በመግባት የሕዝብን መብት በመጣሱ አላስፈላጊ እውቀት እንዲነሳ ምክንያት በማመቻቸትና ኢትዮጵያውያን ወደ ለየለት እርስ በርስ እልቂት እንዲገቡ እየገፋፋ ስለሆነ እጅግ በጣም አሳስቦናል። በተጨማሪ መንግስት በሃይማኖት ተቋማት ስርዓት ሕግ ውስጥ ጣልቃ ከመግባት እንዲቆጠብና ለዜጎች የሚገባውን የሕግ እንክብካቤ በአክብሮት እንዲሰጥ እናሳስባለን። የሰሜን አሜሪካ ኢትዮጵያውያን ስፖርትና ባህል ማህበር ያለንን ጉልበታችንን ሁሉ በመጠቀምና በማስተባበር ካዘኑትና አስጠቃቂ በዓል እየደረሰባቸው ካሉት ኢትዮጵያውያን ወገኖቻችን ጋር በአንድነት እንቆማለን። ሰላም ለሀገራችን ኢትዮጵያ ይሁን። የሰሜን አሜሪካ ስፖርት ማህበር
ስፖርት ማህበር ኢትዮጵያዊነትን አሰባስቦ ለኢትዮጵያዊነትን ጥቁሩን ነጩን ሁሉ በአንድነት የሚያገለግል ትልቅ የኢትዮጵያዊ ቅርስ ነው። እግዚአብሔር ይስጥና ተወሩ በቃ ነው። አሁን አዋጅ ያውጃሉ። ከበሮ መለከትና እልልታ እየመቱ አዋጅ ያውጃሉ። ወደ እነሱ እንሄዳለን። በኋላ ደግሞ የቅድሟ መሪ ቃል ተናጋሪዋ ትቀጥላለች።
In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God, amen. Respected fathers, administrators, members of the clergy, priests, deacons, and faithful who are all gathered here. Even though we, members of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church and the DFW Metroplex, are gathered here under unfortunate circumstances to stand in solidarity for our holy Orthodox and Apostolic Church, we gather here for a holy purpose, in support of the Holy Synod, our bishops, servants of the Church, and more importantly, those who are receiving the crown of martyrdom for their faith. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church is the oldest institution of faith in Ethiopia that served as a strong social bond among its people of different language, ethnic, and cultural background. It is a force that also formed and preserved the country. It is an institution that contributed to education, rule of law, constitution, and above all, peace and harmony among the people. When the country faced aggression from foreign powers, it was instrumental for a show of courage to defend the country against all forms of aggression. It is impossible to imagine Ethiopia without the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. I'll say that again. It is impossible. I want everyone to say it with me. It is impossible. It is impossible. It is impossible to imagine Ethiopia. To imagine Ethiopia without the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. I cannot hear you. Without the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. This historical and iconic and mystical church that has done so much to preserve the country free of colonial powers is facing a grave danger under the repressive regime of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, who is using security forces to intimidate, detain, and now even kill Church Orthodox Christians in support of a renegade group that a form of bishops who are trying to stage a coup against the Holy Synod of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. For the first time in the church's history, the former Abbas Hagios, against the dogmatic principles and the canons of the Holy Apostolic Orthodox Church, appointed himself as a patriarch, with two now defrocked bishops lawlessly ordained 26 monks as episcopate on January 22nd, 2023. Speaking of such lawlessness and divisive acts among Christians, St. Paul said, "Now I beseech you, brothers, mark them that cause division and offenses contrary to the doctrines which you have learned, and avoid them." Romans chapter 16, verse 17. The Holy Synod had no choice but to condemn such acts and excommunicate all those who participated in the lawless act, but with an open hand to receive anyone that would come with a sincere apology. One of the 26 monks has come to the Holy Synod and offered his sincere apology for his involvement in the lawless act just a day before the Holy Synod's resolution. It has been very clear from the developments following the lawless act that they are acting in the interest of the Oromo people, as they have indicated falsely, but they are being instruments of division within the church, with the direct involvement and support of the federal and the Oromia regional government. The Prime Minister, in a speech uncharacteristic of a leader, echoed and magnified the divisive rhetoric put forth by the lawless group as a pretext for their illegal acts, while offering no explanation for the intimidation, arbitrary detention, and forced break-in of the church properties. Most of the servants that are being abducted by security forces in the Oromia region are known for their evangelical work in the Oromia language. The Prime Minister seemed to have forgotten that the Ethiopian Orthodox Church is an entity that has a constitutional right for legal protection against any individual or entity that compromises its principles, properties, and its peaceful existence. Instead, he was often equating the Holy Synod of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church with a group of rebellious dissenters who continue to sow seeds of division with the protection and help of the security forces. of the most important aspects for peace and stability is the preservation of institutions that are bedrock of the bond amongst its people. Race and language have never been and should never be used in the church's apostolic and ecclesiastical mission. Race and language. I want everyone to repeat with me. Race and language. Louder. Race and language. Race and language have never been and should never be used in the church's apostolic and ecclesiastic missions. Instead, it is now being used to advance the objective of political agenda, trying to bend such institutions to the broken political system of ethnic federalism will only lead to the eventual destruction of the federal state itself. When the federal government is the force that fuels the tension among members of such institutions to fulfill its political, ideological, and other hidden goals, the potential for bloody unrest is exponentially increased. Because a government that is willing to bend such institutions to its will undoubtedly move with all destructive assets to oppose its will. So we, Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo faithfuls, we demand that, 1, the federal government recognize its responsibility to protect the interests of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church as it should of any legal entity in the country. The protection of the church is not a privilege for the government to offer, but it's a constitutional duty. I'm going to repeat that one more time. The protection of the church is not a privilege. Repeat after me. The protection of the church is not a privilege. The protection of the church is not a privilege for the government to offer, but it is the constitutional duty. Second, we demand that the federal government to stop intimidation, detention, and harassment of bishops, servants, and the faithful ones. Stop the genocide. Stop the genocide. Stop the genocide. Third, we call on the government to refrain from fueling ethnic tensions among citizens by a false narration of ethnic federalism with the Holy and Apostolic Orthodox Church. Fourth, we demand that the federal government refrain meddling with the church affair other than fulfilling its constitutional duty due for any legal entity in the country. Also, we demand that the federal and Oromia regional government to stop assisting the lawless break-in and take hold of the church's property. Lastly, we demand that the state-sponsored medias, such as ETV and FANA, refrain from giving coverage to these illegal groups while denying any forms of coverage for the church during this crisis. For democracy and peace-loving nations, it is time to take all necessary diplomatic measures to avert the bloodshed of Christians. It is time for the free press to cover this hideous crime against humanity by government of Abiy Ahmed. What is happening to the church now with the forceful political will of the government may be related to the atrocious religious cleansing of Christians from certain Oromia regions in Ethiopia. The imprisonment and arbitrary detention of Orthodox Christians is now taking a new phase, with security forces shooting indiscriminately at those gathered in the church on February 4th, 2023, in the city of Shashamene. Multiple deaths and mass detentions have been reported. There are reports of shooting and attempts to disperse the faithful from the church buildings they are gathering in other parts of Oromia region. We are witnessing a genocide in the making. The world that silently watched the Armenian genocide of millions of Christians 100 years ago is doing the same today. It is better to prevent the unforeseeable cleansing of Orthodox Christians than to argue 100 years later whether this was a genocide or not. May the God of our fathers protect and preserve the church he established with his precious blood. May God have mercy on us, and may God rest in peace those who are receiving the crown of the martyrdom. The United Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Parish of DFW, February 4, 2023.